the tGELF scholars, parents, Mrs. Ishwaran, Mr. Kemka, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. We've just been through these brilliant presentations, and as I was walking up, I asked Mrs. Ishwaran, what do you want me to speak on? Because the tGELF scholars are also brilliant. They're also bright, brilliant, so full of vision. And she told me that we want you to speak on leadership. It's a great pleasure and a privilege to be in the midst of these scholars. It's a great honor because not merely do I admire the great work these young scholars are doing, but because as a parent, I've seen my child grow and evolve ever since she became a Kemka scholar. I think in the context of leadership, we should see it in the context of India, the challenges which India faces. The challenges of growth, the challenges of poverty, the challenge of lifting a very vast segment of our population above the poverty line, the challenge of sustainability in India, and all this in the context of a very young population of an India in which we are going to see, it's rarely ever happens in history that almost 65 to 70% of your population is below the age of 30. India is passing through that window of demographic transition, which rarely happens in history. And the second big thing is that in the next 4 to 5 decades, we'll see 500 million Indians getting into the process of urbanization. And this will bring in radical changes. So whatever we talk of leadership has to be seen in the context of India. And to my mind, there are 6 critical issues of leadership. And these are major principles which are very critical. First and foremost, to my mind, is that a leader has to set the direction. You should be able to close your eyes and look into the future. You need leadership because a leadership is about setting direction and looking into the future. I think this was what Nehru talked about on 15th August when India became independent. He said that a moment comes, which comes but rarely in history, when we step out from the old to the new, when an age ends and when the soul of a nation long suppressed finds utterance. And therefore, the leadership is about confronting the challenges of India. And therefore, at that point of time, Nehru looked into the future and set a goal for a young country. So, to my mind, whether you run a country, whether you run a city, whether you run a company as a CEO, you have to set goals. If you do not have goals, you're not a leader enough. So, as a leader, you're really the captain of the ship. You have to set the direction of the ship. Otherwise, it'll end where the winds, the waves, and the storms take it. So first and foremost, the leader must set the direction. Secondly, to my mind, the leader must have courage. It takes courage to set goals. Every time you set a goal, you can fail. It takes courage to set a new direction. If you want to be a great leader, you have to have courage. And I think you should be willing to take risks. You cannot change anything by not taking a risk and not setting goals. And therefore, I think it's very important to see a great leader think of a great leader like Churchill. His steadfast refusal to consider defeat, surrender, or a compromised peace helped inspire British resistance in the early days of Second World War. His effect on Parliament was electrifying. His first speech to the Parliament, I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. And his second speech, when imminent defeat was confronting Britain, he said, we shall fight in France, we shall fight on the seas and oceans, we shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air, we shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be, we shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the field and in the streets, we shall fight in the hills, we shall never surrender. He converted the war into Britain's finest hour, and that was all about leadership. So, setting direction, courage. To my mind, the third principle of leadership is that you have to be always an optimist. You have to be willing to think success, Being an optimist does not mean that there is no serious problem, but it means thinking success and teaching yourself to be a problem solver. People follow hopes, people follow dreams, and the solution to these problems. You have to lead from the point of view of optimism and success. I mean, look at a leader like Martin Luther King. He had a dream of a country where people are not judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. He made that dream a reality through a process of non-violence. And therefore, leaders must be always spreading optimism. The fourth principle of leadership, to my mind, is relentless preparation. Dreams are wonderful, but you have to have practical steps to get the solution. You have to work hard, rehearse, have all the answers to questions. In fact, sitting next to me was Ajit Bajaj. He's the only Indian to have done the South Pole, the North Pole. He's traveled through the green land, and therefore, he's one of the few people who've done the Pole trilogy. And he has had to work hard, he has had to rehearse, he has had all answers to questions, and therefore you have to prepare everything unexpected that will happen when you take on these challenges. The fifth lesson of leadership, according to me, is something which Geeta Chandran in her dance talked about, and that is teamwork. Teamwork, because you need other people in order to accomplish everything in life. You cannot do everything on your own. You have to balance your weakness with the strength of others and create a great team. And I think one of the great team leaders of this recent times has been Steve Jobs. He's been described as a futurist, a visionary, father of the digital revolution, master of innovation and design perfectionist. But I think one of the great things about Steve Jobs in one of his interviews said his model for business was the Beatles. He said there were 4 guys that kept each other's negative tendencies in check. They balanced each other, and the total was greater than the sum of its parts. Great things in business are never done by one person. They are done by a team of persons, and therefore, to my mind, teamwork is very critical. And the final lesson of leadership is your ability to communicate. You have to be able, and that was wonderfully done by these 4 young team members who made this presentation. You have to be able to get your ideas, market them effectively, use statistics in a simple manner. One final thought, and my personal view is that if you want to be a great leader, you have to love people, care about people, you have to help the people. But I also want to share with you 3 fundamental lessons I learned from my time in my own school, my own college. Lessons that have become a very integral part of me and that have stayed with me. The first is that leaders must always play to win. Don't ever play not to lose. It is said that the World War was won by Great Britain on the playing fields of Eton and Harrow. To win in life, you have to have a winning mindset. You cannot not focus on losing. But I've learned that the goal cannot just be that little better than the next team, but rather to be the best you could be, to draw upon an inner reserve in order to be better yourself and to have the winner's mindset. I've found that winning athletes have always worked with this winning mindset. The famous basketball player Michael Jordan once said, "I do have talent and I have all the skills, but it's my standards that set me apart. Every day of my life, I demand more than myself, than anyone else could humanly expect. I'm not competing with myself. I'm competing with what I'm capable of." And that is what it is leadership. In my experience, great leaders are not attached to other people's standards. They do not limit themselves to what their neighbors are trying to accomplish. They play to win, set their own bar. They clear that bar, and they remain intensely focused on their objectives. Think about Arjuna, who saw only the clay bird on a tree, while all the other peoples of Dronacharya saw the branches and the leaves around the clay bird. So therefore, to my mind, focus on winning and do not focus on avoiding failure. Perhaps I'll give you one great example. The greatest guitarist who ever lived was a man named Django Reinhardt. He started playing the banjo very young. He started playing the banjo, and he was very good. So good that from the age of 13, he made his living professionally as a banjo player. But when he was 18, he was caught in a terrible fire. He was very poor at that time, and his wife used to make artificial flowers out of celluloid and paper to sell for extra money. One night, coming home late from a show, Django knocked over a candle, and all the paper and celluloid caught fire. He survived with first and second degree burns over half his body, his leg paralyzed. That was devastating enough. But more devastating for Django was that injury done to his left arm. The fourth and the fifth fingers were badly burned. For the rest of Django's life, those fingers were paralyzed, shriveled. But Django still wanted to play. He bought a new instrument, a guitar this time, and set himself to play with this new disability with his burnt fingers. He could not do what he had been doing before, what all other guitarists were doing. So Django invented an entirely new technique, and with it, a new sound. His style is called hot jazz, and is known for the incredible speed of play and the range of tone and emotion. He's still widely considered the best in his instrument and utterly unique to the sound he produced. People today cannot figure out how to imitate what he was. Django Reinhardt was playing his own way. He was playing to win. And that's what great leaders are all about. My second piece of advice is don't let pragmatism crowd out your passion. You cannot be a great leader without passion, something which again Geeta talked about in her dance. Many people think that pursuing a passion is irreconcilable with pragmatism. The thing you are passionate about, that's your hobby. The thing you do, you are at work, you are not at work, is your real job. But it's possible, according to me, to be pragmatic and passionate at the same time. The answer is yes, you can be. Be faithful to your sense of excitement about the world. Aim for the sweet spot where pragmatism and passion reinforce each other. If that spot doesn't yet exist, create it. Create that passion. Something will move you. If it is that meaningful, relevant, useful to you, you can make it useful to the world. So passion is critical in whatever you do. And here's my last piece of advice. Have a purpose in life. It's important to have ambition. It's very important. All of us have ambition, but have a purpose. In order to have a fulfilling life, we must look beyond our narrow selves. A great leader is one who looks beyond himself. That a fulfilling life is one where your purpose transcends just taking care of yourself and your loved ones. You must look beyond your standards, your passion. As a leader, you'll have to transcend yourself. And that happiness is not a goal or a byproduct. When I was at your age, this sounded rather extremely far-fetched, too noble, very high-handed for me at the age of 19, 20. As a kid, I had many dreams of things I needed for myself first, and then so that thought of giving back or doing something for someone other than myself seemed a very distant and abstract idea. When I look around the world and I see people like Mr. Khemka, what he's done with the Khemka Foundation, the message strikes me. I recognize the powerful effect of creating global leaders. Now, we are not all going to live the life of Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, or of Malala, the young Pakistani girl who's fought for girls' education against the most vicious attack of the Taliban. But that does not mean that opportunities of purpose, the need for purpose, I'd say are lost to us. Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, two of the most powerful, successful businessmen in the world, rededicated themselves and their fortunes to a new mission. People of wealth and principle have been doing the same for years. Andrew Carnegie, John D. Rockefeller, no matter what path you take, no matter what goals you set yourself for your career, there's a place for purpose in your work. So those are the three lessons. Play to win, keep your passion, pragmatism alive, and put purpose above ambition. But before I leave, there is one thing that I'd like to tell you. It is important to cultivate wisdom too. It is customary to think that only the old can be wise, that young people at your age are naive, they don't have the experience, and they just can't acquire wisdom. Don't believe this. All human life requires the exercise of wisdom for the young as much as the old. To cultivate wisdom, you must be ready in some degree or another to give up your claims to being extremely intelligent. At your age, you are intelligent. You're amongst the most intelligent people to have become the tGELF scholars. But you must be ready to consider that you will give up your intelligence. Wisdom comes from being humble. There is a wonderful Buddhist quote that illustrates this point. Nan-in was a Japanese master of Zen. Zen was the school of Mahayana Buddhism during the Meiji era. Nan-in was a Japanese master. One day he received a university professor from the Japanese Tokyo University who came to inquire about Zen philosophy. Nan-in served tea. He poured his visitor's cup full and then kept on pouring tea in that cup which was already full. The professor watched the overflow until he no longer could restrain himself. He said, Nan-in, this is overfull. No more will go in. Why are you pouring it? So Nan-in said, like this cup, you are full of your own opinions and speculation. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup? And therefore, young scholars, in many ways you'll have to get rid of some of your intelligence to acquire wisdom and become much more humble as you go across and keep growing in this world. I think most of us are more or less like the professor in the story. We too have full cups, at least I have. Especially when we are teenagers, we go through this period when we seem to feel this amazing sense of omnipotence, while all adults around us are ignorant. We think we understand the world and its what causes different things to happen in the world. And sometimes we do, but sometimes we really don't. For some of us, this awakening comes a little later, sometimes too late. Mark Twain famously said about his father, when I was 16, my father was the most ignorant man in the world. By the time I reached 21, I was surprised how much he had learned in 5 years. So thank you, young leaders. Thank you very much. And thank you, tGELF, for giving me this opportunity to speak to you. Thank you. Yeah.